Today, we're tackling one of the most complicated and, frankly, one of the most dangerous geopolitical flashpoints in the world. We're talking about that long, tense, and undefined border between two global giants, India and China. And if you really want to understand the clashes you see in the news today, you have to go back in time and unpack the history of a single contentious line.
And this quote from a former Indian ambassador to China, Ashok K, Kantha, really gets to the heart of it. He says the ambiguity of the border isn't just some historical accident. It's a deliberate tool. It's a major pressure point. That idea that the confusion itself is a weapon is absolutely key to understanding everything else.
So where did all this confusion start? Well, to get to the bottom of it, we've got to jump back more than 100 years. Back to an era of empires and colonial mapmaking to find the origin of the line that started this whole thing.
And here it is. It's called the McMahon Line. Back in 1914, folks from British India and Tibet got together and agreed on this boundary. The logic was actually pretty straightforward and elegant, based entirely on geography. It follows the highest crest of the Himalayas, the watershed. You know, if water flows south, you're in India. If it flows north, you're in Tibet. Simple, clear, and drawn on a map.
Now you might be thinking, where was China in all this? Well, they were there. Their guy even put his initials on the draft, but, and this is a big but, they refused to give the final signature. Now, China today points to this as proof the line is invalid. But here's the crucial detail. Historical records show their problem back then had nothing to do with the border with India. Their entire objection was about how Tibet itself was being divided up. At the end of the day, Tibet was acting like an independent country, and it had every right to make a treaty.
For decades, that McMahon Line was pretty much the accepted boundary. But then, fast forward to the middle of the 20th century, and a brand new and much murkier concept gets thrown into the mix. One that completely changes the game.
And this, right here, is where all the confusion really takes root. You have the McMahon Line on one hand. It's fixed, it's based on a map, it's based on geography, and then you have this new thing, the Line of Actual Control, or the LAC. It was a term China's premier Zhou Enlai came up with in 1959. And notice the difference. It's not based on a map or a treaty. It's based on a vague idea of where each side's troops happen to be. It's a line defined by soldiers, not surveyors.
So not only was this new line vague, it was intentionally fluid. The source material describes it perfectly as a flexible and movable construct. And what does that mean in the real world? It means the line can shift. It moves whenever one side pushes its troops forward. It basically baked instability right into the border.
So, what did China say their line of actual control was? Well, in the Western sector, their first claim was based on a map they'd drawn up in 1956. Okay, fair enough. But remember that word, flexible, because just 4 years later, they came back with a new map.
And surprise, surprise, the line had moved. And it pushed way deeper, gobbling up huge new chunks of what India considered its territory. This constant shifting of the goalposts was a massive point of friction and a direct cause of the 1962 war.
Okay, so after years of tension and even a war, there was finally a real push in the 90s and early 2000s to sort this out, to sit down, talk, and bring some clarity and peace to the border once and for all.
And if you look at the timeline, it really did start with a lot of promise. In 93 and 96, they signed major peace agreements. They both agreed to finally figure out where the LAC actually was by exchanging maps. The process even got started in 2002. But then, when it came time to deal with the most disputed part, the Western sector, China just walked away. They refused to exchange the maps, and the whole process just fell apart.
I mean, just let that sink in for a second. Since 2004, for over 2 decades now, there has been absolutely zero progress on officially defining the border. That ambiguity that China put on the table in 1959, well, it's now set in stone because they refused to help clear it up. And that stalemate, that frozen ambiguity, is what's fueling all the conflict we see today.
So that brings up a really important question. Why would a country want its border to be undefined? Well, it turns out that in the 21st century, ambiguity isn't a problem to be solved, it's an opportunity to be exploited. It's the perfect environment for a strategy that turns a lack of clarity into an actual weapon.
And that strategy has a name: gray zone operations. The basic idea is to make aggressive moves, to push boundaries, to build things, to assert claims, but to do it in tiny, incremental steps. Each little action isn't big enough to start a war, but when you add them all up over time, they completely change the facts on the ground. And this isn't just theory. We're seeing these tactics play out right now. China is literally renaming villages inside the Indian state of Arunachal Pradesh to make it look like they're Chinese. They're creating these so-called buffer zones that cleverly block Indian patrols from areas they've always had access to. It's a classic gray zone playbook, using the undefined border to slowly slice away territory.
But maybe the scariest shift is this one. For years, the LAC was seen by both sides as a temporary line of management until the real border could be decided. But China doesn't see it that way anymore. They've merged the two concepts. They now treat their version of the LAC as a non-negotiable core interest of national sovereignty. And when something is a core interest, it means there's no room to compromise.
And that leads us to the fundamental question, the absolute core of this entire conflict. It's a strategic nightmare, really. For India, or for any country in this position, it all comes down to this one incredibly difficult puzzle. How in the world do you defend a border that your neighbor is actively and strategically refusing to define?